MOUSILLON lives! Figuratively speaking, of course. Hello fellow artists of the blue, and welcome to my channel, and also welcome to another episode of Heavy Contrast. Heavy Contrast is a series where I try to paint one miniature to the highest standard possible using just contrast paints and highlights. And for this episode I'm very happy to announce that Games Workshop asked me to collaborate with them making two painting tutorials, one for each of the new Warhammer Underworlds Narwhal box set warbands. I couldn't resist starting with one of my favorite miniatures of late, the amazing Sons of Velmorn, but first let me address the color scheme. You see, this is how they chose to paint them. And it's lovely, but... Yeah, we're not going to do that. Let's get cracking. As you can see, we are starting from a Sandyfall base coat of mechanical standard grey all over and white scar just from above. And our first step is going to be to start pre-shading all of the cloth. And for the black cloth, which will be the first one we will paint, I'm going to use Grief Charger Grey, which I'm just going to do an all over layer. This serves two purposes. One is give the undertone a colder look, and second is to make it a bit darker, because Black Templar on its own is not dark enough for me. Ideally, I would probably wait till the Grief Charger Grey is fully dry and do the rest of the black, but just to save time I'm going to start pre-shading the yellow robes, and for this I'm going to do Magus Purple, but just apply this on the shadows. We have a fantastic map of the highlights and shadows here that we're going to use to place the Magus Purple. I'm going to use it in this way. I'm going to apply it and then I'm going to feather it out. Clean my brush very quickly into the pot of water and just take the Magus Purple off where I don't want it. I'm going to do a couple layers of this till I have a nice shading. I'm also going to apply this all over the edges of the details. I will be careful around details that are not metallic because I don't want to lose that nice pre-shading, but for the metallic details I don't really care, as they will be fully covered with metallic paint afterwards. If you don't feel comfortable with feathering, you can always use glazing. You just thin down the Magus Purple with some Lamian mediums or contrast medium and just apply glazes. I just feel this is faster. Also, Magus Purple is not the strongest color of the range, so you won't have many issues here. The pre-shading of Magus Purple over the Zenithal is now finished, and you can see how dark I went in some places. This took about 3 layers. Note that the back of the cape is also going to be yellow, but I didn't do it because I want a different shade of yellow on it, and I will approach it differently. And now I'm going to apply Black Templar over the black details. I do the black first because if I had to fix something, now is the easiest time to do it, because if I did the yellow first, this will be a real pain in the ass to fix. With the black now mostly dry, I'm going to paint all the yellow areas, starting with the robes. That will be a layer of Yanden yellow over that nice pre-shading. And we don't really need a very thick layer here, you really just want to tint what's there with yellow. As I said, I also want the cape to be yellow, but I want a different hue, so I'm going to try to do a mix of 1 part Nasdaq yellow and 1 part contrast medium. It should give us a more mustardy, ochery look instead of a more vibrant yellow. I just realized I forgot to paint one bit there with Yanden, that I will sort out once this is dry. And now I'm going to paint the bones using a skeleton hood. And I just realized I forgot to paint black the mantle around his head. That will be black, so you can do that at the same time as the inside of the cape. Now I'm going to paint all the leather bits using wildwood. And the only detail left to paint that is not metallic is the fur on his cloak, and for this I want something gold to offset so much warmth, and for that I'm just going to take Space Wolf's Grey, apply it to the bottom and feather it out into the top. And on top of that, I'm just going to take a mix of 2 parts medium to 1 part Space Wolves Grey and apply that over the rest of the fur. I'm going to go around absorbing as much of this as possible, so it's as pure white on the top as I can get it. With all those base coats now done, I'm going to move into start highlighting, and I'm going to start with the yellows just because I really like painting yellow. And I'm going to start with the robes, which I want them to be a cold yellow, and the first highlight is going to be a 1-to-1 mix of Elysian green and Flaskid's yellow. It might seem like it's weird to use green to highlight the yellow, but it's really going to work on the darker sides. And I'm going to start applying this, as I said, on the darker parts of the robes. I will be both doing a thick edge highlight with this, but also glazing this towards the highlights. And for the next highlights on the robes, I'm going to use Phalanx Yellow. I will use this again in 2 ways, doing a thin edge highlight. And I'm also going to do some glazing to smooth out some of the highlights, especially here on the volumetric details and stuff like that. And finally, I'm also going to use this to do some weathering on the bottom of the robes. Just your usual scratches, marks, lines, all that stuff. And for the final highlight on the yellow, I'm going to use Dawn Yellow. So as you can see, we're moving through very cold hues of yellow here. Not that temperature in yellow is that prominent because it's inherently a warm color, but we can move into colder shades like this one that we're using here. Also introducing greens fit very well for the theme. I'm just doing a very small edge highlight with this essentially. And after all those highlights, to increase a bit of saturation, I'm going to do a glaze using Bad Moon Yellow. I'm just thinning Bad Moon Yellow with Lamy Medium till it's really thin. We just want a filter here. And I'm just going to glaze this over all of the cloak. You don't want any pooling whatsoever here, just a very thin glaze. And to finish off the cloak, I'm going to use Dawn Yellow again to do a final highlight, just basically some dots of this to reinstate our highest highlight, which has been lost after the glaze with Bad Moon Yellow. Now I'm going to paint the warm yellow cloak, and I've been doing some tests and I think I found a recipe that I like. First of all, I'm going to start doing a thick edge highlight using Baylor Brown onto the bottom edge of the cloak. Basically where it's the darkest. We just want to go around doing a thick edge highlight here. You will see there is a point where this color basically disappears. That's the point we want to stop doing this. We can add some weathering as well with this, as we did on the rest of the cloak, just on the darker sections. For the next highlight on the cloak, I'm going to use Flaskid's Yellow. And what we will do with this is first of all a thin edge highlight all over. We are also going to increase the weathering. First of all, reinforcing the weathering we did with Baylor Brown, and of course adding more. And we are also going to do a general volumetric highlight, thinning this down to sort of a heavy glaze consistency, something like this, and just glazing this towards the highlights on the curved bits. Most important advice I can give you about working with yellows is to be patient. If you try to force it and cover more than you should, it's going to look horrible. So be patient and just do thin layers until you have the effect that you want. And for the next highlight on the cloak, I'm going to use Dawn Yellow again. I'm going to do a couple of things with it as we've been doing before. First of all, I'm going to do a thin edge highlight again, just concentrating it towards the very brightest points of the cloak. I'm also going to thin this down to a sort of a heavy glaze consistency, and I'm going to do a highlight on the volumetric details. Mix of glazing and stippling, a little bit of everything. With this kind of mini, it's very liberating to do whatever you want. Do some scratches, do some stippling, do some glazing. It doesn't really matter, it's going to look good in the end. And now to reinforce the warmth of this side, I'm going to do a glaze using Imperial Fist. And again, the key here is not let this spool at all. We just want to do a uniform layer of this all over the yellow bits of the cloak. And I'm going to reinforce the last highlight we did using more Dawn Yellow. Just basically I'm going to repeat what I did in my last highlight, just with a reduced size, so we get back our values. And now with my cape finished and looking beautiful, I'm going to swallow all my brave pills and try to do something very scary, which is painting a freehand on the back. And of course it's going to be a fleur-de-lis. And I'm going to start with the vertical line, trying to follow the flow of the cape. Then I'm going to sketch the middle section. I'm using black Templar, by the way. Now it's time to paint the main shape of the two vertical sections. And finally, I'm going to try and paint the curved sections. Now it's time to paint the black, and for this I'm going to start with a thick edge highlight of 2 parts Thunderhawk blue and 1 part black. This is very simple, as with all thick edge highlights, you just have to be sure that you can make a thinner edge highlight afterwards. So a good trick that I learned from Infernal Brush is that you make your thinnest edge highlight first and then you double it. In my case, I am confident on what I can do, so I don't need to do that, but it's a fantastic way to judge your edge highlighting capabilities, basically. For our second edge highlight, we are going to use a mix of 1 part Thunderhawk blue and 1 part Fenrisian grey. And this time we do want to make the same edge highlight with it, but try to make it as thin as possible. For me, the best advice for this is just use the very tip of your brush and be gentle, just glide it over the surface. You need to basically learn how to have that soft touch with the brush. Also with this mix, we're going to start to do the weathering. And for this, we're just going to do the same as we've been doing before and just do some scratches and lines. With that highlight done, we are going to move into the next highlight for the black, and this will be just pure Fenrisian grey. What we are going to do with this is do the same thin edge highlight, but concentrating it towards the corners and upper edges. Also, I'm going to reinforce some of the weathering with this. And now for the final highlight on the black, I'm going to use blue horror, and I'm just going to do a small dot of this in the very corners. Very, very small. As you can see, I also highlighted the fleur-de-lis on his cape, but I had a little fun with it. I have a full video dedicated to freehand, so if you want to watch it, it will be linked in top right corner. And I'm going to paint the leather, and for the first highlight I'm going to use Night Questor Flesh. This will be a simple thick edge highlight all across the leather. In some parts I'm just going to go all over the belt if I feel like it needs a volumetric highlight, and for the rest the thick edge highlight will suffice. And now for the second highlight on the leather, I'm going to use Baneblade Brown. And this will have to be the thinnest edge highlight you can make all across the leather. For the next highlight on the leather, I'm going to use Karak Stone. I'm essentially going to do the same, but leaving some of the Baneblade Brown showing on the lowest parts. With that highlight done, I'm going to move into the last highlight for the leather. It will be a 1-to-1 mix of Karak Stone and pure white. With the leather done, there is just the bone left to paint, and I'm not happy with the definition on some areas, so I'm just going to take wildwood and do a recessed shade on the less pronounced areas, for example here, just to emphasize the definition of the bones. And to highlight the bones, I'm just going to use Karak Stone for the darker bits, for example here on his face. There is a lot of grey showing, so I'm just going to go around with Karak Stone, making a small highlight. And then I'm going to go with a mix of 1 part Karak Stone, 1 part white, and highlight the rest of the bones. And now for the final highlight on the bones, I'm going to use pure white. I'm just going to do a very small edge highlight on the bones. With all that done, it's now time to paint all the metallic details, and I'm going to base coat all of them using Iron Hand steel. With all the metal now base coated, I'm going to apply a wash, and for that I'm going to use a mix of 1 part Black Templar and 4 parts Contrast Medium. After this first layer, I will probably do a second one, because I feel it is not dark enough. If I were to start this all over, I will probably use a mix of 1 part Black Templar and 3 parts Contrast Medium instead. And with the second layer now applied, I'm going to reinforce some of it on the sword, because I want a stronger TMM pattern. So what I will do with the same mix is apply it on the top section of the blade towards the natural shadow, just like that. And if you feel like you have a strong separation, just feather it out a little bit. And on the bottom section, I'm going to darken it down just to pure black. I will leave the middle section a little bit more light there, but I want a fairly dark situation here. And now for the bronze details, what I will do is first of all a richer shade on the smaller ones with wildwood, just like that. And maybe on some of them I will do a layer and a feather out towards the bottom sections. For example, one of the keys I'm going to do that. It's just a way of creating appreciating. That's going to be more noticeable on the crown because I want a strong vibe here. So I'm going to apply wildwood, clean the brush and feather out towards the top section. And maybe a little bit towards the top as well, like that. I will do that on all the metallic details. With appreciating done, I'm going to go back to Iron Hand Steel just to highlight some of the bits. For example, here at the crown, it has a raised edge here that I want to pick up. Edge highlights these bits here, just picking up details that should be highlighted before we do the next step. And now I'm going to apply a layer of skeleton horde over all those bronze details. I ended up doing 2 layers of the skeleton horde over the small details like the keys, the belt buckles, all that stuff, not on the crown or on the sword. And now I'm going to highlight the steel, starting with Iron Hand Steel. I'm just going to reinforce the highlights present so we get a little bit of the shine back, and doing a small edge highlight. Here on the sword, I'm going to do the same, but on top of the edge highlight, which I'm going to do on the blade, I'm also going to reinforce the top section here. Being so flat, I will do a little bit of feathering. And on the bottom part, I want to do something different. So I'm going to do a small highlight here, but leaving the black showing in between the middle ridge and this section, just feathering it out, something like that. Going to do the same on the middle. Like a sort of a kind of a semicircle. And with all that done, it's now time to highlight all of the metallic details with a final highlight of Stonehorse Silver. Just the thinnest edge highlight you can make. With all the metals now finished, I'm going to do something I hope cool with the sword, because I want these spots of light to be reflecting the surroundings. So for the top one, I'm just going to take Yandan Yellow, thin it down with contrast medium to a very thin glaze, sort of like that, and apply it and glaze it over this top spot here. And for the bottom spots, it really depends on what basing you're going to do. Since mine will be done using the Cursed City basing, I'm going to use Cohelia green shade, but you should use whatever color your basing is. Again, thinning it down with contrast medium to super thin glaze and applying it on top of these bright spots. It's better to do a couple layers than to do a very thick one. And because I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, I just realized that I forgot to paint the fur, so I'm going to solve that. The first highlight will be Blue Horror, and I will just use this on the lower parts of the fur. You will see there is a point where this is doing nothing. Up from that point I'm not going to highlight anything. I'm just picking the very tips of each strand of fur. This fur has so much texture that it really doesn't need a lot of highlighting. And to finish off the fur and the model, I'm just going to use pure white to do the final highlight. I will concentrate this highlight heavily here on the band of light that I left, just here in the middle of the fur, and I will do smaller and smaller highlights the more I move away from that. Maybe just dots here at the bottom. And with the base painted using my Curse City basing tutorial, King Velmorn himself is completely finished. I had so much fun painting him, and I love painting yellow myself, so it was a real treat. I really hope you liked the video, and don't forget to catch the next one, where I will be painting Sarakar Blackwing from the Null Spirit pack. If you like my videos and like to help me make them, you can follow me on social media. You have all my links to all my social media in the description below. Share and like this video, but most importantly, there is Patreon and channel members. Patrons and members allow me to do all the cool videos that I want to make, and most importantly, they allow me to release them all for free here on YouTube. Perks include access to an amazing Discord community full of lovely people, early access to some videos, plus access to my Royal Retinue review, where I give you feedback on your miniatures monthly. So help me and my family, and join the list of the coolest persons in the planet, including Heather Amstead, Tyrannosaur, LMAP Limited, Tom Brand, Chris Gothenthal, Carlos Rivera, Thomas Ustergaard, Javi Mota, Christoph Moret, Michael Boye, Victor Dolmen, Robert Smith, Nicolas Furnell, Brian Betzow, Tim Uchida, Howard Houtbill, Stephanie L, Nick DeMau, Faces and Bases, David Sutherland, Dark Awok, Roger Nilsson, Tasted, Oscar Jonathan Thornberg, Dan Mako, Chris Talios, Jamie Milligan, Kevin Mian, Darcy Farrar, Chris Fivey, Samuel, Natius Maximus, Arundel, Gareth Smith, Mark Jarvis, Josh Simpson, Charles Armitage, G-Force, Dr. V, Leonard Lindemann, Kieran Murthail, and Kevin Sulas. As for me, I will catch you in the next one. Bye.